Hello children, welcome to the class of biology. Today we are going to start the new chapter in biology, and that's life processes. And let's see what is the meaning of life process. The various functions or the life activities which are carried by the living organism, and that's required for the maintenance and continuation of the life, which is called as life processes. And you know that, and every living organism has different life activities, and that's required for the well-being of the organisms. And they includes nutrition, respiration, transportation, excretion, movement, reproduction, etc. So you should know that life processes are the functions or the activities carried out by the living organisms for its maintenance and continuation of the life. Okay, let's start with the first life process, and that's nutrition. And nutrition is a biochemical and physiological process by which the organism uses a food and which is required for the existence of life. And it includes ingestion, absorption, assimilation, biosynthesis, catabolism, and excretion. So the intake of food and its utilization, it comes under the term nutrition. The various chemical compounds of the food, we call it as nutrients. So the nutrients are being extracted from the food and which is required for the proper functioning and the maintenance of the health. And the nutrients can be classified into two main categories, and which is based on the amount by which it is being utilized by our body. So they are macronutrients and micronutrients. Micronutrients are the nutrients which are required in very small amounts by the body. Examples: vitamins, iron, copper, zinc, iodine, cobalt, etc. And these are required in very small amounts by our body for its, the life activities. And those are called as micronutrients. There are some nutrients like, proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and even, sodium, magnesium, potassium, calcium, etc., which are required in larger amounts. And we call them as macronutrients. So you should know that nutrients are the chemical compounds which are present in the food. And based on how much it is required by the body, we can classify that into two main types. And if it is required in small quantities, we call it as micronutrients. And if it's required in, relatively larger quantity, we call it as, macronutrients. Is it clear? Let's see the types of nutrition. There are two main types of nutrition, and we call them as, autotrophic nutrition and heterotrophic nutrition. The organism which does the process of autotrophic nutrition, we call them as autotrophs. Whereas the organism which does the process of heterotrophic nutrition, and they are called as, heterotrophs. In case of autotrophs, they prepare food by themselves by using simple inorganic materials. And that is why we call them as autotrophs. Auto means self, trophs means feed. And they prepare food by themselves from simple inorganic substances. And for that process, they use either light energy or the chemical energy. If they use light energy, and we call that process as photosynthesis, and there are organisms, they use chemical energy, and in those cases, they do the process of chemosynthesis for the preparation of food. Anyway, you should know that autotrophic nutrition is a process in which autotrophs prepare food by themselves from simple inorganic substances, either by using light energy, as in the case of photosynthesis, or by using chemical energy, as in the case of chemosynthesis. Okay? And whereas in case of heterotrophs, they could not prepare food by themselves, so they depend on autotrophs ultimately. And they take, the food, and the food will get digested. From that, the energy will be produced. So they are either directly or indirectly depending on autotrophs for their food. So organisms which cannot prepare food by themselves but depend on autotrophs for their food, we call them as heterotrophs. This you will be studying in detail later. Okay? Now let's see, what are the two main types of autotrophs. I told you, autotrophs can prepare food by themselves, but the source of energy, it varies. In case of photoautotrophs, they prepare food by, themselves from simple inorganic molecules, but for that process, they use sunlight as a source of energy. All green plants and some blue green algae also, that comes under prokaryotes, and they use sunlight for the process of photosynthesis, and by that they convert simple inorganic materials to food. So the process by which autotrophs, if it depends on light as a source of energy, we call that process as autotrophic nutrition, and those organisms are called photoautotrophs. Whereas, as I told you earlier, chemoautotrophs, and they derive energy for the synthesis of food, they get the energy from some chemicals like sulfur, ammonia, etc. They use those materials as a source of energy to synthesize the food. And there are bacteria, nitrogen fixing bacteria and all examples for that. So autotrophs are of two main types, and that's based on which is a source of energy. If light is a source of energy for the process, we call them as photoautotrophs. And if the energy is being derived from chemicals, we call them as chemoautotrophs. Is it clear? Now let's see what is photosynthesis. And you know that photosynthesis is a process by which green plants and some other bacteria like blue-green algae, they prepare food by themselves by using, solar energy. Am I right? And it is a process, during that, the inorganic molecules like carbon dioxide and water. So carbon dioxide and water, these are the inorganic molecules. And in the presence of sunlight and a pigment which is called chlorophyll, and this pigment is seen inside the chloroplast of the leaf mostly. So in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll, the inorganic materials like carbon dioxide and water which combines and glucose is formed. And this process of synthesis of food from inorganic materials in the presence of light and chlorophyll, and we call that as photosynthesis. And during the process of photosynthesis, the main product is glucose, and the byproducts are water and oxygen. And during photosynthesis, plants take carbon dioxide and release oxygen. That's why we call plants as purifiers of the environment. They take carbon dioxide inside. Carbon dioxide is being fixed, and that is in the form of glucose. It's being converted into the useful material, that is the glucose. So the synthesis of food in the presence of light, and that's called photosynthesis. The raw materials for the process of photosynthesis, and they are carbon dioxide and water. Is it clear? Now let's see where the process of photosynthesis takes place. The site of photosynthesis, that's mainly the green leaves. In the green leaves, you know that they have the plastid, the green color plastid. We call that as, chloroplast. You have learned that already. Inside the chloroplast, the pigment, it's present. That is, chlorophylls. So the green pigments, which is present in plants, that helps in the process of photosynthesis, which is called chlorophyll, that we have seen previously. And that's why the leaves, mostly the leaves, are able to do the process of photosynthesis. They have the pigment, the chlorophyll, for the process of photosynthesis. See, this is a sectional view of a leaf. If you see the sectional view of a leaf, you can see that two epidermis, upper epidermis, lower epidermis, and this the other cells at the middle region, we call it as mesophyll. And towards the upper side, you can see mesophyll cells are, closely packed. They're elongated and closely packed. We call them as palisade mesophyll. Whereas towards the lower side, it is loosely packed. And such mesophyll cells are called, spongy mesophyll cells. Both are having chlorophylls. And spongy mesophyll cells are mostly towards the lower epidermis because you could see more number of stomata at the lower side. And stomata, it's meant for the gaseous exchange. See the structure of the stoma? And it's meant for the exchange of gases. These are the openings on the surface of the leaves, which is meant for the exchange of gases. And stomata, it's present both on upper and lower epidermis, but the number of stoma, it's more at the lower epidermis. See this? There's an opened stoma and this is the closed stoma. You know how it opens and closes? Here, if you see these cells are called guard cells. Two guard cells. In dicots, you already studied that guard cells are, kidney shaped. And if you see the inner wall of the guard cell, it's thick, whereas the outer one is thin, And here you could see that during daytime, you could see the stoma opens. You know how? During daytime, the process of photosynthesis occurs. So the glucose molecule gets accumulated. And glucose, that it's a solute. So more solute concentration during daytime. As a result, what happens as you learned, in ninth class, the process of endosmosis takes place. The solvent molecules from other cells, subsidiary cells, enters into the guard cells, the kidney-shaped guard cells. What happens? Then the guard cells become turgid. And it helps in the opening of the stoma because, the inner thick wall pushes out the thin wall. The stoma opens. So during daytime, stoma opens. That's due to endosmosis. So the exchange of gases takes place, carbon dioxide and water. It takes place through this opening. During nighttime, the reverse thing happens. There is no photosynthesis, right? Because no light. So what happens? No solute or less solute. Exosmosis takes place. As a result of exosmosis, solvent molecules, it moves out. What you could see, it becomes shrunken, it becomes flaccid. And, the guard cells, it becomes shrunken, it closes the stoma. So you should know that stoma opens during daytime, whereas it closes during nighttime. And the opening and the closing of stoma, it depends on, the day and night condition because it is through the process of endosmosis and exosmosis. Is it clear? Now let's see, the structure of the chloroplast. This also you have learned last year. And it's a double membrane structure. The inner contents, entire contents of the chloroplast, we call it as matrix. It's divided into two. Am I right? See? Inside the matrix, you could see coin-like structures arranged one above the other. Each coin-like structure, we call them as thylakoid. So thylakoids are arranged one above the other. So, and it forms granum. See, this is a single granum. Plural form is grana. See, these all are grana. So you should know that granum, each granum is made up of many thylakoids, which are arranged one above the other, like a pile of coin. See, chlorophyll pigments are present inside the granum, inside the thylakoids of the granum. Is it clear? And see the rest of the fluidy matrix, we call that as stroma. So there are two, the matrix can be divided into two, the grana and the stroma. Is it clear? Chlorophylls are present inside the thylakoids of the grana. And in case of photosynthesis, there are two stages. One is called light-dependent reaction or light reaction. Another one is called light-independent reaction. See, light reaction, it takes place inside the granum of the chloroplast, whereas the dark reaction, it takes place in the stroma. I told you there are two stages in photosynthesis. One is dependent on light, another one is independent of light. And the first one which is dependent on the presence of light, we call it as light reaction. The second one which is independent of light, we call that as dark reaction. Let's see what happens during light and dark reaction. During light reaction, what happens? The light energy from sun, which is being trapped by chlorophyll molecules. See, this is a representation of the granum. And see, I told you the thylakoids of the granum has chlorophyll. So during light reaction, the sunlight, the light energy from the sun, which will be trapped by the chlorophyll molecules, and there the light energy will be converted into the chemical form of energy, that is ATP and NADPH. So the light energy will be converted into chemical energy. That's a main process of light reaction. And not only that, in the presence of light, the water molecule which gets splitted, we call that process as photolysis. Photo means light, lysis means splitting. So photolysis of water, splitting of water in the presence of sunlight. And what happens? Hydrogen and oxygen, they are produced. And in case of photosynthesis, oxygen is a byproduct. It is being produced, it is being released, and that's through the process of photolysis of water. So these two are the main events of, the light reaction. First one, it's absorption of sunlight. Second one, conversion of light energy to chemical energy. That means ATP and NADPH. And also the splitting of water, photolysis of water into hydrogen and oxygen by light energy. Is it clear? During second phase, that means in dark reaction, what happened? Actual fixation of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is being reduced to carbohydrate. Glucose molecules is being produced during the second phase, that is not depending on light, the presence of light. We call that as dark reaction. It is proposed by, two scientists, Melvin and Calvin. We call that as Calvin cycle. And I told you, light reaction, it takes place inside the granum, whereas a dark reaction takes place in the stroma. In dark reaction, what happens? The ATP and NADPH, which is produced by light reaction, is being utilized to produce glucose. Carbon dioxide is being fixed and being converted into glucose by using the energy molecules of ATP and NADPH2. Is it clear? There are two processes, in case of photosynthesis. One is depending on light, another one is not dependent on light. So they are light reaction, dark reaction. And it's very important question, the events of photosynthesis. Absorption of sunlight by chlorophyll, conversion of light energy to chemical energy and splitting of water molecules, and then reduction of carbon dioxide by hydrogen to form carbohydrate like glucose. Is it clear? Light reaction, the first two step occurs during light reaction, that takes place in the granum, because chlorophyll molecules are present inside the thylakoids of the granum, whereas a dark reaction takes place in the stroma of the chloroplast. Is it clear? Let's see the differences between light reaction and dark reaction also. I told you, light reaction is dependent on, the presence or absence of light. For that, light is required. Whereas in case of dark reaction, light is not required. It is light independent reaction. A light reaction takes place in the grana of the chloroplast, whereas dark reaction takes place in the stroma of the chloroplast. And during light reaction, only I told you the splitting of water molecule. Photolysis of water takes place during light reaction, and which produces hydrogen and oxygen. And whereas during dark reaction, no photolysis. The end products of the light reaction, which are they? The chemical form of energy, ATP and NADPH2. What about the end products of dark reaction, that is glucose? And this is dependent on light, the presence of light. So it's a photochemical reaction. And whereas dark reaction is a biochemical reaction. Is it clear? Thank you.